By welcoming up Bill CREBER, art director from Planet of the Apes. And Dan STRIEPEKE, makeup artist. And joining Bill and Dan, we have Dylan Clark, producer of Rise, Dawn, and War. Rupert Wyatt, director of Rise of the Planet of the Apes. We have SCA alumnus Matt Reeves, director of Dawn and War. Rick JAFFA, one second. Rick JAFFA, the writer-producer of Rise, and writer-producer of Dawn, and producer of War. And Joe LETTERI from WYATT, who is currently nominated for an Academy Award for his exceptional work on War of the Planet of the Apes. Thank you all very much for coming here tonight to celebrate this 50th anniversary. I thought, maybe we could start back when Arthur Jacobs first discovered Pierre Boulle's novel Planet of the Apes. One of the biggest hurdles that he faced as producer trying to get the film greenlit was that it was a tough sell, that the apes would be believable, and that they wouldn't be laughed off the screen. And one of the things that really convinced the studio and Richard Zanuck to move forward was a makeup test. And so I thought we could start a little bit with the work on designing the apes, and Dan, the work that you and John Chambers did to create apes that people would take seriously.
Well, John was, contacted in Spain. He was doing a picture exchange. He was contacted to come to Fox and see if he could give a tryout. There had been some tests made prior to that.
Can you hold the mic a little bit higher?
There had been some tests done prior to that, and they were very unsuccessful. At that time, I was doing Mission Impossible with Barbara and Martin Landau. Anyway, Ben and I, who was head of the makeup department, they had done some tests with Edward G. Robinson, and they were very unsuccessful. And so John Chambers got a call in Spain from Ben and I, and to come and see if they could solve the problem. So John finished his assignment there and came back here to Hollywood. Meanwhile, I had just finished the season of Mission Impossible, and I received a phone call from Ben and I saying he'd like to submit my name to take over the makeup department head because he was retiring. And of course, John and I go back a long way. We started at NBC at the Pinky Lee show. But anyway, so this amalgam came together. And Bill CREBER can fill in a lot of stuff too here. But we started, experimenting with what the look was going to be like. And it was just damn difficult to come up with a reasonable look that was not comedic or laughable. And of course, I think Franklin Schaffner was so brilliant in his casting. That was big plus in the equation. And because originally they were going to use Edward G. Robinson, and of course he couldn't stand it covered up at all, and we got, like Maurice Evans and Kim and Roddy. That all, it was just wonderful.
We'll come back to the actors in the makeup, but I want to also talk a little bit about the design of the Ape City, because one of the big challenges of adapting Pierre's novel is that the apes are living in a perfectly modern, technologically advanced society, and the screenplay reflected a different vision, and things that needed to somehow seem organic to how an ape culture would exist on our planet. So, Bill, tell us about the original discussions that you had with Arthur, with Franklin, about what Ape City was going to look like in this version.
Well, yes, I had a meeting with Arthur and Franklin, and I had read the Pierre Bull book, and so they asked me what I thought we should do, and I said, well, I think you need to go someplace that won't give it away. And I said, well, I was thinking that we could, according to the book, we could go maybe to Brasilia and do it like Pierre Bull said, and which was monkey bars for crosswalks, but it was a modern city. But it, was pretty involved. But I thought there would be basics. And Arthur said, "I'm not giving you a trip to Brasilia." He says, "You're going to do it, and I don't want anybody to know it's Earth." I said, "Well, Arthur, it's Earth. I mean, what are we going to do about it?" He said, "Well, you're going to find places that nobody's ever seen." And so after that meeting, I had a meeting with the head of the art department, Jack Martin Smith, and I told him what the problem was, and he said, "Well, you of anybody know where to make this picture." He said, "Didn't you make a greatest story up in Lake Powell? Nobody's been up there yet, and we were. It was early 60s, and only a few really adventurous people went up." And so we use that as sort of a visual place beginning. I think you'll notice that some of the rocks begin to look like the buildings that we built. So we saw that problem, and Frank brought it. Well, all those places you saw were walked through, and the hilltop was done from a helicopter flight that I made with Franklin Schaffner, and we put down up on the rim, and he said, "Well, I'll figure someplace to do, we're going to make this shot." And I said, "Okay, give me a minute." So I put the film wrapper, we use film then, and I wrote on it, Franklin Schaffner and Bill CREBER were here, and I dated it, and I put it in the film can, and I built a rock arm about that high. And Frank says, "Come on, let's get out here." So we continued our scouting. So the day we shot, Frank told Heston to get in the helicopter. We're going up for the next shot. And Heston he says, "A helicopter? What are you going to do? How's this going to work?" And Frank says, "Come on." So they flew up there, and Heston was still saying, "Nobody's been here." And Frank went, "Undo those rocks." And so Heston did it, and he says, "I'll be damned." He really. But what bothered me more is they didn't put it back. Anyway. My story on makeup, I'll make it a little quicker. I got a call from Arthur Jacobs. He said, "We're not getting anywhere with the makeup. It's going too slow." He says, "See if you'd know help and do something." You know, and I said, "I'm not going to the makeup department. They don't want me around." You know, it was private to go in there. It was.
Yeah.
You didn't go there, even you know, in my position. So I said, okay. So I went down and met Dan and John, and we, you know, I said, if I was Dick Zanuck, I would ask if I'd ever looked at an ape. And they said, well, we've got walls of photographs they made at the zoo, and they had research, and they had, but a real ape, I said, well, how are you going to do that? I said, well, I talked to Arthur. I went over and said, well, you know, they're moving in a direction, but they could see you seeing an ape. And Arthur says, so get him an ape. And the rest of it, I had an ape over there the next day, and they almost took this poor, was Debbie from, I think, Lost in Space. The prop man knew, you know, had a property department. So we had, they took hair samples and color samples and texture samples, and I don't think it was a week later they were starting to really go. So, you know, the making a motion picture, I gotta make this statement, is a collaboration. A collaboration of some hundreds of people that have different jobs and different levels and different inputs. We just, you know, when you think of something that might work or make something work better, it doesn't matter who says it. It can be, you know, anyone on the unit that comes forward, and you hope that everyone is receptive of suggestions, and if they work better than the script, the director will do it. And Franklin Schaffner was one of those people. I had a lot of opportunities to in fact, the beginning of the picture was written where, you know, you see the spaceship actually crash. And I told Frank, I said, I don't want another borderline miniature going into Lake Powell. I said, what if we did a subjective camera and just fly the audience let them ride the spaceship? And he says, that's what we'll do. That's what we'll just do it. But there was that kind of collaboration. The other thing I'm most proud of is that Frank and I were having a drink at a bar in Lake Powell, Wall-Week Lodge. And he said, the end of the picture is too abrupt. And he says, can you think of something that'll extend it? And I said, I grabbed a bar napkin and I sketched a little storyboard of his approach, the views of the cliff, and over the back of the Statue of Liberty. And he says, fine, we'll do it. I said, well, I don't have a budget for these shots. He says, don't worry about it. That's what we're going to do. And so I misplaced the napkin. I'm sorry to say.
I definitely want to come back to the Statue of Liberty, but before that, I want to hear a little bit about what this film meant to all of you who, so when you saw it for the first time. I know, Matt, you had the Super 8 film clips from Beneath, so please let us know a little bit about what this film meant to you when you first saw it.
Well, I think I was introduced to the whole series from the television show. And I was obsessed with it. Like the way that everybody's into Star Wars now, which I was into Star Wars later, but this was my Star Wars for me before Star Wars. And I had got an 8mm camera when I was literally a wind-up 8mm camera, not even Super 8, when I was 8 years old. And I had this projector, and we got some Super 8 footage, which you could buy then. You couldn't get, so imagine a time when you couldn't like watch something on your phone, or you couldn't watch a movie, you couldn't stream. It didn't exist. You had to see it. You could see a movie on TV, or you could see it in the theater, or you could get these little excerpts that were on Super 8. So it's actually in the exhibit. But there was this thing that I had that I watched until all the sprockets broke, which was from Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which I thought was the scariest, coolest movie ever. Like, I don't know if you guys seen it, but like when the mutants, it's crazy. When the mutants take off their faces and they're praying to the nuclear weapon, and they say, I reveal my inmost self into my God, and they look like the scariest thing you've ever seen. I was like, this is really not good. But I was really scared. And so I used to dress as an ape. I mean, I had a mask, and we made. So then when I was 11, we made a mashup, which was a cross between Planet of the Apes, because I had these ape masks, and Star Wars. The movie was called Galactic Battles. And it was me and my friends, and we were just obsessed with Planet of the Apes. That's what I would do. I love that thing. And I have to say that the makeup that you did, I have to say that as a kid, if I could have had, just looking at the exhibit, if I could have had those appliances, that was my dream. Like, I had a mask, but the mask didn't have the articulatable mouth, and I just thought, God, I'm not like Roddy McDowell. I mean, those movies meant everything to me, and I think your work is incredible. Your work is incredible. It's an honor to be up here with you. I love it.
I open the same question up to the rest of you. Was there any particular memory of watching this film that stuck with you? How did it influence you growing up?
Rick, you want to take that one?
I'll take that one. I'm afraid I don't have anything quite as charming or wise, but no, for me, I really grew up watching The Twilight Zone and worshipped at the altar of Rod Serling. And I remember friends coming to school and saying, there's this movie, Planet of the Apes, you've got to see it, it's got this incredible ending. And, but we don't even tell you what it is. And so when I saw it, of course, it blew me away. But when I put two and two together that Rod Serling had, written the script with Michael Wilson, but I really believe that was the beginnings for me of really wanting to be a writer. Trying to craft something as subversive, and bold as Planet of the Apes.
Well, the idea of bringing apes back into our world must have been daunting, and I'd love for you to share a little bit about the research that led to the idea of writing a new ape story.
Right. Well, the funny thing is that Amanda and I didn't start out to recreate the Planet of the Apes franchise. We just had been collecting articles about people who had been raising chimpanzees in their homes as if they were children, and it always went badly and horribly. Actually, they would attack the owner or a neighbor or something. And I bet we cut out articles for over 3, maybe even 5 years. And we'd find them and just collect them, and we kept thinking there's got to be a movie there somewhere. And then the truth is we were between jobs, and I packed up like a list of ideas and clippings of all these different things and took them up to Ojai for the weekend to try to come up with what would be our next script. And just by fate, I had these clippings of these families that had raised chimpanzees in their homes next to this pile of articles that we had collected about genetic engineering. It was just total chance. And I was sitting on the floor and articles all over the place. And my eyes kept going back and forth between those two stacks of articles, genetic engineering and these people that raise these chimps. And literally a voice in my head said it's Planet of the Apes. And the structure for the first movie came together almost within minutes, to be honest. And so I packed up my stuff, and I was very excited, and I drove back home, and I ran to the office, and I said to Amanda, she said, what have you got? And I said, honey, I've got an idea. It's going to change the world. She said, what is it? What is it? I said, we're going to reinvent Planet of the Apes. And she looked at me with this frozen smile on her face, like, you poor stupid son of a bitch. Are you kidding me? That's your idea? And I said, no, I just started pitching her what I'd been thinking. And then she said to me, so it's a character piece? And I said, yes. And that afternoon, Caesar was born in our office. And the pitch was, very simple. I mean, 10 minutes, to be honest. And by a miracle, Fox said yes. And then a lot of the research, actually, the real research started. Chimp behavior. We rewatched all the Planet of the Apes movies, and really took our time with it. But it's really one of those, thankfully, one of those things where, my muse spoke, and I was thankfully listening, and it came together really. The story came together really quickly.
Well, Dylan, Rupert, and Joe, I'm assuming that you faced the same challenges that Arthur Jacobs faced with the original film, which was that you knew that for this story to work, you had to have an ape that was going to be completely believable, and someone that a character that you really cared about. And the work is amazing, but it wasn't guaranteed in advance that you were going to care so much about Caesar when it was, purely in script form. You actually had to bring in someone like Serkis and know that the technology was going to be there to support that vision. So for the three of you, tell us a little bit about, I guess, the deciding to move forward with it, what you did to know whether or not it was going to work, and what kind of innovation you did in terms of making sure that Caesar would be fully believable.
Well, we had, Rick and Amanda truly did write an incredible idea for a movie, which was, you start with, this beginning with the ape being brought, out of its habitat to San Francisco. But then you follow the human protagonist, which is played by James Franco. And the trick of the movie, which was, again, so brilliant, is you thought you were going to follow the human story, but at the end of the second act, at the end of the first act, you followed Caesar, and that you were in his being. You were Caesar. And so we knew we needed to, the world had gone from this incredible makeup, which is so brilliant, to these giant visual effects movies that Joe LETTERI happened to do most of them, which was this incredible fortune we had. He had done King Kong, and he had done Lord of the Rings, and this little movie called Avatar. He's not very good. So what we needed, though, was with this great idea, with this script that was just so emotional, we needed to find somebody, an emotional filmmaker, that was going to connect to this new protagonist. And we found Rupert, which, Rupert had made this great movie called The Escapist, which was just this beautiful journey of a man in prison, redemption story. And it just felt like he was the right person to do this first movie. And when we talked, he had the right vision and connected to this character. And I think that was it, which was, it was going to be a blend of, we were going to use this technology because we had to, because that was where the audience was. But we really needed to do service to this idea that was about character and emotion.
Yeah, we also had a slightly different situation to the original films, which is we were dealing with real life chimpanzees. So we weren't dealing and starting our mythology from the same place that the originals were. We didn't have elongated arms. We didn't have we couldn't put a human actor into a suit because we had to evolve the chimpanzee into something more human. And so we very quickly moved away from prosthetics from that practical reason, and then we looked into the notion of doing a film with live apes. And aside from the ethical reasons, there was also many practical concerns with that. And this was all in the very, very early days when I first got involved and was working with Rick and Dylan and Amanda and Peter Chernin. And we were sort of sitting around a table trying to figure out how do we evolve this, where do we start it from? And obviously we live in a day and age where visual effects have much to do with Joe Letteri, have become so seamless in terms of live action narrative filmmaking that it was so clear that we could tap into that. But what we didn't yet know was whether we could actually tell a story with a sentient, emotional character that was built entirely from visual effects. And obviously with motion capture, that is now something that is very achievable. And it was only in the previous 8 to 10 years with Avatar, Lord of the Rings, with the Gollum character, with King Kong, it was only then that we began to see that happen. And of course that is Joe and that is Andy Serkis. So that's when we picked up the phone.
We also, and this is, I'd like to, we give a lot of credit to Joe, and he deserves it. But Rupert and I had long discussions, and Peter and Rick, long discussions about, how we were going to use actors in this movie, and we thought we would do it with these certain kind of stunt apes. And Joe said, "That's great, but that's not going to work. You need an actor. You need somebody that actually can do this." And I'm telling you, you need Andy Serkis. And we said, yeah, whatever. We don't need Andy Serkis. And then we went back and we watched we did the research and we.
There's a really good example of that at the end of Rise, the whole sequence that takes place on the Golden Gate Bridge. That was originally filmed exclusively with stunt actors, and with the notion that we would then do the face capture separately. And it didn't work. It didn't allow us to really tell the story, because even though it was a big action set piece, there's much storytelling going on there, with most specifically the idea that the apes are not looking to harm us but looking to escape, and all of those decisions were being made through performance. So we had to go back and reshoot it with our actors, and it was a great learning process, I think, for everybody, for the future films as well. I'm sure with the idea that this has to be built from performance, and then allow WYATT to then take that on and then bring it to life.
Joe, I imagine you and Dan actually had similar challenges, which was how do you fully transmit the emotions of the performance through the ape makeup, or in this case, the performance capture. Tell us a little bit about how you were able to offer the actors something really unique in terms of how their facial expressions would be translated onto the screen.
Well, as Dylan mentioned, I was very fortunate when we were doing Lord of the Rings to work with Andy Serkis. And one of the things we discovered right off the bat as Andy was playing Gollum is to go back and to try to recreate that, like using traditional animation techniques. Didn't feel like we captured everything that was there. So we tried this idea of motion capture, asking Andy to come back in, put markers on his body, and just recreate the performance for us. And what was really a bit of a science project in those days, but we were so excited about what we were seeing, because Andy is such a great performer, and there were just all of us in this little room watching him just create these scenes, and we thought, we have to bring that to the screen. And that was like the genesis of it. Andy really kind of was so good that we just wanted to make that work. And so we did that on Gollum. We did it on King Kong. We experimented a little bit more, because on Gollum, it was only his body that we could capture. The face was all done, by hand, by keyframe. On King Kong, we learned to capture the face. We figured out that by gluing all these markers on the face. When we did Avatar, Jim Cameron wanted to break the whole thing free. So we had the actors running around in a motion capture volume to record their movements, but wearing head cameras. And that was all done pretty much in a virtual world, so it was like self-contained. When it came time to do the story for Rise, I really did want to work with Andy again, because I thought he'd be just great for the character of Caesar. And what I really wanted to do was to figure out how to make that happen in the moment. In other words, I didn't want to go back to Andy after all these films and say, can you be there for the actors, but then when it comes time to do it, you're just going to have a bunch of us in a room watching you. I wanted his performance that he was doing on the day to be what was in the movie. So we came up with this idea of actually doing performance capture live on set. And that was a bit of a new thing as well, because, you know, Dylan, you'll remember, filmmaking hasn't changed in 100 years. All the departments know what they're supposed to be doing and where they're supposed to be. And suddenly we show up on stage with about 30 or 40 extra cameras and a bunch of lights and just say, excuse us, we're gonna just cover your set with this stuff so we can record the action that we wanted. And it was a new thing for everybody, but once we started, getting the sense of how it would work, and obviously Rupert was really great, because as the director, when you own that, you can just say to everybody, this is what we're doing. And everyone got into the spirit of it because you had Andy there and all the other actors performing everything live. So the drama that you see, the movie that you see, actually exists with just the actors without any of the digital transformation into the apes. That's how and why this process works. It works for the actors and the director when they're shooting. It works for the editors. It works for the composers. It's all there, just like shooting a real movie. Then we take on the research and the transformation of those actors into the digital apes that you see on screen. But we can do it now with a fidelity that is pixel by pixel, matching the actor's expressions and matching the actor's performance. So hopefully all the detail that you see that translates into the emotion comes through. And again, we were very fortunate to have 3 films to work on, because in this last film, the whole story, Matt went very deep. Caesar was very much in inner turmoil, and that was a lot of long, lingering close-ups that we could not have done at the time we did Rise. It was just all too new.
And it's actually getting back to the original part of the question. When you made the original, they didn't know it was going to work. And when Joe actually pitched that exact same thing to Fox, we were on board. We didn't know what we were doing, because neither of us had really done any visual effects. You had never done one visual effects shot in your life. Who were you? Two shots. He said all that, and we were all like, yeah. But we went out there, and he hijacked the set with all his guys, and we didn't know what we were doing, or if it was going to work. He thought it was going to work, but we really didn't. But what we knew
He says that now.
Yeah, well, what we did know, and again, we had a great script, and we had, we had characters that you loved, so we believed in our story. So at the end of the day, we always have that to fall back on. So, but it was.
There was a moment during post-production where we had yet to see an ape shot fully rendered, and up until that point, we had cut the film, as Joe said, using the live-action actors in grey suits, and we had performances. We had a lot of actors emitting ape noises, and the studio was panicking. And then I remember Joe came to the Fox lot and said, I have something to show you guys, and it was one shot. And we went down to the basement of the screening room at Fox, and we put it up on the screen with the Fox executives, and we played this one shot on a loop. Joe played this one shot, and it was Caesar in his cage watching the prison guard character played by Tom Felton walking past, and it was just his eyes moving, and it was exactly the shot that we had shot with Andy, and the same eyes, and it honestly looked like real eyes in an ape suit from the original film. It was extraordinary in terms of how lifelike it was, and we all just sat there completely in awe, just watching this thing on a loop for about 10 minutes, like we had a movie. So it was incredible.
Dan, take us behind the scenes of all of the revolutionary makeup at the time, the working process with Roddy McDowell and Kim Hunter and Maurice Evans. Roddy McDowell was pretty claustrophobic. Maurice Evans seemed to really take to it. Give us a sense of what that was like, what the process was like, and how each actor kind of approached it.
Well, yes, of course, in my world of doing makeup as opposed to CGI, I start off by covering the actor's face with impression material, and it's rather restrictive and claustrophobic, and then transfer that to dental stone, and then to do your sculpture on that, and then do the negative, and then finally come up with a positive, and of course the product is then glued to the actor's face. Let me preface by saying I don't care how good a makeup is on a performer's face or body. If they're not performing, it doesn't work. And this is where the genius of Franklin Schaffner came in, because Maurice Evans and actors of that caliber, and Kim Hunter and Ronnie, they could transcend or go through that makeup and bring it to life. And that's what made the whole thing work, I think, ultimately. And I've done 54 years in the makeup business, and I've seen my own work go down the drain because the actor just won't project through it, you know, or can't. And you sit there looking like, oh my God, we got a flat tire here, you know. And then what do you do? But on Planet of the Apes, the casting was absolutely brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. And I laid that at Mr. Schaffner's feet, you know.
Well, Ronnie talks about some of the things that he had to develop in order to make the expressions work. And part of it was a discussion about there needing to be constant movement, because there wasn't, it would seem like he was wearing a mask if he didn't have sort of facial antics. So tell us a little bit about working with Ronnie over the years, some of the things that maybe he helped to influence and you guys might have worked together on to continue to allow his emotional performance to come through.
Well, I think one of the things about that was to take the original design and then reduce and reduce and reduce, but maintain the integrity of the work, so that it gave more flexibility to the actor as far as how he could work through that foam rubber and give a performance and have it show. So the appliances from the inception to when we actually went to filming were much smaller, but did the same job, only better, because the actor could transpose through the prosthesis. And plus, the other part of that equation, of course, is to have fine actors who can project, and you know, Edward G. Robinson, for instance, was on the early part of the development of Planet of the Apes for the makeups. And of course, he was claustrophobic, so he turned them off as fast as you're putting them on, you know. But even when you got it on, he just wouldn't project. Nothing came through. Edward G. Robinson was back there, but it wasn't an ape or a gorilla in front of him, you know.
Well, let's talk a little bit about this piece that we have here, Bill, from your collection, a miniature from Ape City. Give us a sense of how the miniatures worked alongside the matte paintings and other things that were actually built on set to create this vision of a society. And tell us how you actually built the proper Ape City homes in Malibu Creek.
I'll try to shorten it, but I have to make one remark. The production office at 20th Century Fox is in charge of making things as cheap as they can make them. And when I saw the makeup, they said, we don't have to buy actors, we can get stuntmen to do this picture. That was their whole idea, and Frank said, no, I won't do it, I won't even talk about it. He said, we gotta get better actors and the best, you know. But anyway, yeah, he held out for it, he shut them up in a second. Well, when I got into the picture and got turned down about going to Brazil, and Arthur says I wanted to look like nothing on earth, I began to look through all kinds of architecture. It had to start somewhere. And I had a little book, it was only about that big, called Architecture Without Architects. And it was all about the native, every form of, it's amazing what has been done in Africa and other primitive societies that created architecture and without straight lines. And excuse me. I also researched, with broader books, and I found the city of Cappadocia in Turkey. And it was quite an inspiration, to see these things completely created like sculpture with the only way they could have done it is mentally how to do these. And I had an artist that was assigned to the picture, Mentor Hübner, and he's a little bit crazy, and I said, here's what I see. I said, something based on this feeling of Cappadocia without, you don't have to copy it, but see what you play with. So Mentor went, he did I brought some samples of his work, but then we used Mentor's work for research again, and then picked out elements that he had expanded on, and then began to put on shapes. And then we, what was next? It got going, I had a model built at this scale, 1/4 inch to the foot. And the model builder at the studio had a wonderful department. So he took Mentor sketches and Cappadocia and began to sculpture these buildings. And I just said, keep going, just egg them on. And we finally put together, the model was pretty big. And we then got approved, and we picked a building to start with. I had no idea how to build it because it's completely, it's not organized in any way. So we had to organize it. So we took Connie Morris was the model maker. We took his model as clay and had a cast. And then we took the casting and sliced it like bread. And then I had the guys in the drafting room get big sheets of 1/4 inch grid, and they took those bread slices and traced around them. So we had the sections of these buildings. Then one of the young carpenters came up with an idea. He built me a chair out of thin rod, we call it pencil rod, and it's the cage it was like the armature on the buildings, the cage that they were penned up in. So then he took pencil rod and foam and sprayed it from the inside. He covered the armature with cardboard, and the shape is kind of an abstract chair, if you can imagine, like that. And then sprayed from the inside, and then peel the cardboard off, the gores of cardboard, which we were able to see the building start to take place because it was controlled by this armature. And that's what we ended up doing. That whole thing was built. The areas where Heston had to run on and physically we then had to do some of that with cement, but it was very hard to keep it. The carpenters think in shapes of a 2x4. They were kind of blown away with this whole thing, but it finally got done. I was visited several times at the ranch in Malibu, the studio. We had access. The 20th Century Fox had a new deal. They got helicopter so they could get places quick. So I was visited by Richard Zanuck, and the head of production at that time. And when was I going to get done with this? There was always the urge. We've run out of money. I said, hey, look at it. We're creating something that had never been done before. But like the makeup, and so it was really, like I say, a collaborating thing. I don't think everybody helped a little bit, and from mentor sketches to the guys that had them. But they were quite efficient buildings in the heat of summer out there, and the makeup. These foam buildings, they could cool them, so that they air conditioned a few of them and used them for makeup rooms and relief rooms for the actors.
Matt, I'm sure you can relate to hearing about extreme weather building sets and being on a physical set for Ape City, because your vision in Dawn is amazing and you built a lot of it. So tell us a little bit about how you wanted to design the ape civilization in its nascent form as opposed to highly evolved, and why you chose to build so much of it.
Well, I think the thing that I was so stunned by in your film was that how real it seemed. And I thought that reality only heightened your ability to sort of go with this fantasy so that you would really believe that Andy's performance as translated into this ape was a character who was in a real place. And so the apes, all that stuff that you do at the beginning of the film where they're in the jungle and they're catching the apes' bright eyes and all that, that stuff was, like, to me, very inspiring. And I thought, okay, I think that what I would love to do in our film is, like, imagine, like, the end of that film is that the humans, they're in trouble because you guys have that great sort of thing where you're watching and you realize, oh, the pilot's spreading it here and then it spreads there and then you guys got big trouble. So that's not good for them. But what that means is that the apes are going to start over. And I thought, wow, this is cool. This is like the dawn of man, but with the apes. So I thought, well, it would be really cool if we could just imagine the world that they would have created. We're beginning a film where the first 20 minutes will be as if there are not going to be any humans in the film, and this would be the society that they would create. And so James Chinlin, who was our brilliant production designer, we just looked at forms. I mean, a lot of exactly what you're talking about. We looked at forms and then tried to figure out how we would take those forms and put them into nature and do it as if it had to do with the strength of the apes and what they would build, what they were able to do. Kind of the way you're talking about, the way in the book, the idea was that they would make walkways that were monkey bars, like they would make places that make sense for them, and he built these vertical spaces. And I wanted it to be as little virtual stuff as possible. There is some small bits of it that are virtual, but everything has a fundamental thing. And one of the things that James did was he goes, well, I think what we could do is we'll use real logs. These aren't going to be paper mache. I got a guy, and we're going to figure it out. And he had a guy, and this was our set, and we stood on this set, and it was incredible. We built it, actually. So we shot in Vancouver. We were in the woods. But then, in order to build that village that you're talking about, that was done in New Orleans in the summer. First of all, New Orleans in the summer looked like post-apocalyptic world because it was all so overgrown from what had happened. Katrina, we shot at this parking lot in Six Flags, which had closed, and it had a sign that said, "Closed for storm." And that storm was Katrina, and it had never reopened, and it was an incredible place. It was covered in overgrowth. And I was like, wow, this is like the world without us. And in the parking lot, James and the amazing engineers that I had, they built these, they built it out of all solid logs. It was an engineering feat. They worked it out in CAD and worked out in the computer how they would do it, and then built this incredible environment. And then we had the actors in their mocap suits and all of WYATT's cameras all over, and they were just roaming all over it. And so a lot of stuff that I think people think was created, so much of it is created because the apes weren't there, but the environments are all real. And so it was the same kind of thing, which is like, how do you create this? What is this like? And that's the fun of making movies, getting to have that kind of moment where you dream about what you're going to do, and you hope it's going to work. And I was going to say, like, the thing for me was, I came in, and I'd done a little bit of VFX, but we actually met during the mix, and I came up and I was like, "You're Rupert," and we hadn't met. And I was like, "Can I just tell you that I have so much respect for you, not only because I love Rise, which I did, but also because I'm making this movie, and I know how ridiculous we look all the time. We got these guys going around in pajamas. It's crazy." And it's like, and I said, "But I knew it was going to work because I saw your movie, and it was really good." And I was like, "Oh my God," because it's a crazy process. But this is the fun of getting to make movies. You take these crazy leaps, and you tell these stories, and get to do it in a way that nobody, really thinks you could do it. And you spend most of the time thinking, is this going to work?
What I really love about the modern films is that they really do pick up the themes that are established in Planet of the Apes. Particularly, Rick, you mentioned that this is man's hubris that leads to his destruction, and I want to talk a little bit about how these films in many ways speak about very similar human condition problems in different eras. So Rupert and Rick, tell us about what you wanted to explore in terms of how the ape stories talk about our society.
Well, when we started out on the very first draft, it was intimidating because we were trying to live up to the legend of the whole Planet of the Apes franchise mythology and so forth, but we were always on solid ground because we had a theme that we believed in. We wrote it down on a Post-it and we put it on top of our computer, and it basically, I think, is the same theme as the original film, which is that man's hubris can be his downfall. And if we got lost in a scene or a sequence, we would just go back to that and explore that. And it could be argued, in the original, that it really wasn't a nuclear bomb that put Colonel Taylor on that beach with the Statue of Liberty. It was man's hubris. So that for us, and was a great safety net. But we've also talked a lot about the fact that using apes, our very closely related cousins, allowed us to explore human nature, really, but through a filter that's comfortable. So you can get in and explore certain things that may not be as comfortable if we're using human actors.
Yeah, I think obviously all of the best science fiction, and it in cinema probably starts very much with Planet of the Apes, comes from this notion that it's a mirror to our own reality, and Rod Serling, Pierre Boulle, they all seem to come from that place, and that was, for me personally, the inspiration in this idea of being able to explore themes that are very relevant to us in a modern society. And the two, if you said, and obviously there are many thematic journeys that you could explore in the original films, but if you said that they were, for example, dealing with the notion of civil rights, which was one of them, I think for me, going into Rise, the thing that I found extremely interesting was the opportunity to explore how we treat our animal cousins, especially those that are sentient. One of the things that really struck me when we were actually exploring the use of live-action apes was, I think Rick, you and I, we went up to this ape farm about 50 miles north of LA and met some young adult chimpanzees who are used in entertainment. And the thing that really struck me was when one of the trainers said that they have the sentience of a 3-year-old child. And now that I have children and know exactly what a 3-year-old child thinks and feels, that's quite an extraordinary understanding of who they are. And so for us to be able to tell that story, the idea that we obviously nurture them, we care for them, but we also use them in vivisection, and that was part of the story, this idea that these apes, in a Spartacus way, are very much our slaves in many contexts, and the idea of emancipation and that uprising that could come from a place where enough is enough was a really compelling story. And I saw that reading Rick and Amanda's scripts from the get-go, and it was something that I really wanted to latch onto as a filmmaker.
I'm always shocked at how bleak many of these films wind up ending, because this is big, expensive, popular, in some cases G-rated entertainment, but they go to places that you do not see in big commercial, fun, all audiences movies. Obviously, they work on both levels. They work for adults, for its themes, and they work for children because they're exciting. But Dylan, I wanted to ask you, because you're shepherding this, you're really supporting the vision of these writers and filmmakers, but you were working within the context of summer blockbusters, of the stakes of making films that are this expensive. Tell us a little bit about fighting for the vision of these films, because humanity is essentially wiped out. Very sympathetic characters are murdered. Which reflects a lot of things that happen in the original films too. I mean, the destruction of humanity, every film sort of ending on a note that does not exactly make you feel good about where we're headed as a civilization. What kind of considerations did you have in terms of delivering films that would work but also maintain these themes?
Yeah, I think to me, growing up with movies, loving all types of movies, but the big movies always did one thing, which the great big movies, they were honest portrayals of people and situations, and I think these movies in particular, they're honest. The characters are honest, they're real, there's a truthfulness to the experiences that are happening, and I think the audience wants to go on that ride, and I think Rick and Amanda wrote just a script where you cared so much about this character who became a hero that you wanted for this time, and I think to earn that truthfulness, you were able to see some tough stuff, and once you connect that way, the highs and lows are what audiences want. So I think we knew that going in. I think we looked at a lot of other films. I think Peter, mine, Spock's goal was to make a commercial movie, but the most commercial movies often have a certain quality to them, with a high execution, with themes and some tough stuff. So we were going for it, and great sci-fi does this thing, which is it will mess with your mind a little bit. It'll give you this thing again if it's in a truthful way. At the end, that feels real. They want to come back for more. So I think we wanted to earn our endings and not just have a gimmick, but really kind of put something in there that felt like, oh, this is what would happen. And that was the goal. And I think it was really hard losing Rupert from, as Matt said, we went through this journey together with Rick and I and Joe, just figuring out how to use this technology out in these physical production sets. But the benefit was bringing, again, sad losing you, I missed you. But Matt came in, great fan, and again, really interested in the process, but also had this thing, which was, for him, great cinema was really going after all of these pieces. That's the other thing about this journey, which is, there's a lot of people on a movie set that make these things great, but I'm sitting on a stage with some of the greatest talent you can ever be with when you're doing big entertainment like this. So.
Can I add to that for a second? The thing is what we were all on board with, and I think, having watched the movie again tonight, tonight's movie was a character piece. And, Taylor starts off as a cynic, you know, a misanthrope, you know, a total a-hole, you know what I mean? and has lost his faith in humanity. And by the end, he's the lone defender of humanity. And he finds in the end, though, that he was right all along. That is really bold, daring stuff to tell. And I don't know that we were that bold, but the one thing that we were all committed to is that all three of the films are character pieces. And it got deeper and deeper as each movie went on. And we all believed that if we were honest and told an honest story about a character, that people would come. You know, people would show up. And they did. And you know, the big battle in the first one was that we were told, as Amanda and I went off to write, that let's be really clear, you know, it'll never be the Apes movie. It's going to be James Franco. It wasn't James Franco at the time. It's going to be Will Rodman's movie. We go, oh yeah, sure, you bet, absolutely yes. And so that had a little bit to do with the fact that the first act was his movie, but we slowly subverted that to, you know, being in Caesar's point of view, and never once did I feel any wavering at all on anybody's part. And I think that it does take a team, really dedicated, hard-working people to make this stuff pull off, because you can go wrong so many different ways. And you know, the studio's got a lot of money, right? I get it. They got a lot of money right on it. And I can see where they wouldn't want an ape, computer-generated ape that's going to go from Pinocchio to Moses. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. But
Fox deserves a lot of credit
They
there
do.
too, which
They
is
do.
they backed, never once, well, once we got going, they were all in. There was a couple times in the very beginning stages of Rise, but once we got going, they backed it all the way, and you know, certainly in our experience on Dawn and War, they were in. They bought into Caesar, the hero. This is our protagonist. They bought into some of the bleakness. You know, we put in. We didn't have to go get Tom Cruise to balance out. No offense to Tom Cruise, who we love, but we didn't need, you know, a giant movie star to balance this out. We were making movies that we thought were organic.
Yeah, I have to say, because it was John Kilkenny, who heads up visual effects at Fox, that sent me the script, and he said, do you think we could do this? And I loved the story. I mean, what Rick and Amanda created was great, and I just said, we have to do this. Like, I want to see this movie. You know, and to me, what was great about it was Caesar's story. And we knew that all along. I don't know who you guys were thinking about casting opposite Caesar. I didn't care. I knew this was going to be Caesar's story. Because, yes, they're bleak, but in these stories, humanity doesn't die. Humanity is reborn through Caesar. Caesar carries the spark of humanity through these films. And that's for me, that's what I wanted to see. That's the twist. That's the way we look at ourselves in a new and interesting way. He starts off as a kid. It's a coming-of-age story who suddenly realizes he's not the person he thought he was, and he's got to go out and find his way in the world. I mean, what better story is there than that? And to carry that through, to be able to carry that through the three films, and to really, you know, have him make that final sacrifice to lead his tribe out of, you know, where they are, and to break free of the humans, you know, the way the last story comes to a conclusion. Like, to me, I'm sad that happened, because I'd like to see more of Caesar, but on the other hand, it's kind of a really fitting, you know, end to his story.
Well, I didn't think that this special guest was going to be able to make it tonight, but we actually did, in fact, get a late addition to our panel, and I'm so glad that he can actually be here. Please welcome Dr. Zayas.
Hello, everyone. Oh, hello, everybody. Thank you very much. Thank you very much. How did you all get in my room? That's a Frank Sinatra joke. Come on. Boy, I tell you, I was sitting in the back, and I thought, boy, you get one human that can talk, and then there's another, and another, and another, a whole nest of them. That's one of my lines from the movie. Hello. Okay. Alrighty then. Lovely to see everyone. Thank you all for coming, and thank you for enjoying the film. Let's have a round of applause for this. What a bunch of talent. What a talented, what a wonderful, okay. You know, I live up in Ojai now myself, and I was not going to come down, Alan, because to me, the Forbidden Zone is the 101 on a Friday. And I'm not joking. I live up there. I live near Peter Strauss. He has a horse that gets in my yard. That's a whole other story I don't want to tell you. It's lovely to see you all. And what an honor it is to be on this stage with this august group of people. And what an honor it is for them to be here with me.
I think Dr. Zayas, you're probably the perfect person to tell us a little bit about working with Chuck Heston.
Well, I have a lovely story about Chuck, but this is neither the time nor the place. Hello, Dick. No, I'm teasing. That's Dan Striepeke, one of the best makeup men in the business. And, you know, Chuck, and you had to call him Chuck. You couldn't call him Charlton. He said, "Hello, Chuck. Call me Chuck." And I go, "No, I'm much more comfortable calling you Charlton." And he goes, "Chuck," very seriously, and he didn't call him Chuck. But he is the reason this film got made. Artie Jacobs, who I met, God, you know, I'm an old hoofer. And I met Artie. I was doing Scudda Who, Scudda Hey in Oakland with a very young Barbara Feldon, who's a dynamo. She is you get a Mai Tai in that woman, and she is the devil in polyester pants. Oh. Sorry, I have a new hip. The doctor has a new hip. But Artie knew he needed a star to get this film made, and Paul Newman was originally attached to this in the very early stages, I believe, and then Chuck came on board, and he really championed the project back when not a lot of A-list stars were doing science fiction or fantasy, however you want to describe it. And he really championed the film, and then they got it, and everybody told Artie no 2 or 3, 4 times, and he would just keep going. He would just keep going back, and that's a good lesson. That when someone says no, you keep going back. If you're trying to get a movie made, not with a lady. By the way, funny, just a quick aside about this. You know,